Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. In this episode, we're going to talk about the 5 most common mixing mistakes. This is what I am continually encountering. So even though we've probably talked about these 5 in different videos over the last 3 or 4 years of doing the channel, I'm going to highlight what I believe are the 5 most common mixing mistakes that we all make. I hope you are doing marvelously well. Please hit that like button and subscribe. And of course, you can go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list and get a whole bunch of free goodies and also try out the Academy. There's a 14-day free trial. And please don't forget to leave a bunch of comments and questions below. As you know, we do a frequently asked questions Friday. And so we do scour all of these comments here to find questions that are reoccurring or, most importantly, are just freaking awesome questions that we want to answer. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Those of you that follow me will know this one pretty well. Number 1, the first most common mistake that I see is not high passing. Okay, I talk about this all the time. Just because we can't hear low end on an individual instrument or even necessarily in our mix doesn't mean it's not there. The reality is most of us are mixing on 6 or 8, or if we're lucky, 10-inch drivers, but most of the time 6 or 8-inch drivers, even smaller sometimes. Most people don't mix with a sub. I highly recommend it if you can get one, but the reality is that you're probably in a smaller environment with small speakers, maybe even just spread this far apart, and you're sitting there, with your laptop or your small home system, and you're mixing. So what I did on an electric guitar the other day is I created a high pass filter and I put a compressor afterwards. And we were compressing up to like 3 or 4 or sometimes 5 dB of gain reduction. I took the high pass, and as I moved it closer and closer to about 100 hertz, it suddenly stopped compressing because all of this low end that was down there, even though it was barely perceivable, was adding so much more volume to the guitar. So suddenly I had a cleaner, more focused guitar sound, but I got rid of everything below 100 hertz. Well, not entirely. I was using a very gentle slope, probably like a 6 dB per octave, which is a nice, gentle sounding slope. The reality is that low end was just all mud. And you can do this everywhere. Richard Furch, the great mixer, as I'm sure you know, has worked with Usher and Prince, as an engineer and a mixer, is super talented. He told me he goes down on dance kicks and takes 20 hertz. And high passes at 20 hertz, because he says that super low end just muddies up, takes so much energy in his mix. His master bus compression's like going 2 or 3 dB more than it need be, and then suddenly he's cleaning up low end. I mean, I'm not talking about taking it up to like 200 or 300 hertz. I'm just like tightening up the low end on individual instruments. Can just give you so much more focus, more clarity. And remember, when you've got a lot of instruments with low end, it's not just the rumble and the mud and everything, it's the clarity. You'll get more bottom end if you have focus of a bass guitar or a bass synth sitting there super fat, a kick drum, an 808 or whatever is super fat, than having synths overlapping down there. Because think about it, here's a big low frequency coming out of an instrument. Here is another low frequency slightly offset. What do you get? Yes, you guess it. You get phase or polarity cancellation. So you don't get more low end. You actually get less low end. It turns into absolute mud and there's no focus. So remember, high pass. Now, I know I talk about it all the time and it's become a standing joke, with those of you that watch the channel, but I talk about it because it's still a problem I get. I get sent mixes. I stick them on the speakers here, I crank them up to listen to them, and there's no definition in the low end. And it's not because they're not boosting the low end, it's because it's just a big bleeding mess of instruments all fighting for the same low end. So create clarity down there, high pass. Also, low pass. Don't be afraid to do some low passing, because if you've got an electric guitar that's got some really nice bite at about 5, 6, or 7K, try low passing it to about the 7K area with a nice gentle 6 dB slope, well, this side, for those of you looking at it, imagining a screen. You bring it up to about 6 or 7 and a 6 dB low passing slope. You might find that it doesn't change the nature of the electric guitar in the track, but it gets rid of a lot of sizzle and painful high end that you don't want to hear. That will suddenly disappear. The vocal will breathe 7, 8, 9, 10K. Suddenly the air on the vocalist is back. The cymbals come alive, maybe some sizzle on the acoustic guitars. Suddenly it gets clearer. You can do so much with low and high passing. It is the number one thing that I hear in mixes that I want to help people do. So don't forget and don't be afraid to high pass and of course low pass. Number 2, do not apply EQ on your mix bus to solve problems in your mix. I know I talk about this all the time, but the reality is you need to go in there and find out where the issues are and solve them there. I know I've probably said that in 3 different videos, but it's something I still get. I still get sent mixes, roughs, mixes by bands that I work with, and that is the most common thing that happens. We all know that there's an abundance of low mids in pretty much every instrument. I mean, if you take a ride cymbal and tap it, there's a nice 300-400 kind of like going on in there. In a ride cymbal, let alone an acoustic guitar, an electric guitar, a bass, a vocal, low mids are pretty much in everything. There's very few things that don't have a decent amount of low mids in it. So what does that mean? That means all of these instruments, you've got like 40 channels all playing at once into a mix bus, into your master bus, you're going to have a real buildup of low mids. So the inclination, which I've seen a lot of people talk about, is to just go along to your mix bus and pull out about 350, 400 hertz. Sure, that sounds better, but it really is, as the old joke goes, putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, because nothing is consistent. It means that when X, Y, and Z instruments play together, 3, 4, 5 instruments play together, there may be more or less low mids going on when another set of instruments play together. So what's my point? You need to get in there and find the buildup of those low mid frequencies on the individual instruments themselves. You need to control them in those elements. It's not just low mids, it's generally low mids, but it's also things like harsh high mids. As you may know, if you followed me, I love using de-essers on things that you wouldn't normally associate with de-essing. Often I'm given guitars that are not necessarily recorded. Kempers can be great, Axe effects can be great. It's not really so much that, it's some of the older pedals. Some of the older like pod kind of pedals, which were okay, they were pretty good. There's some multi-effects boxes and people take direct outputs and put them into, their DAWs. And I'm not trying to come down on some of the older technology, but, sort of early 2000s, late 90s stuff tends to sound very, dare I say, digital. What do I mean by that? Like super bright, super aggressive. And so people give me guitar overdubs they've done with some of these older boxes that don't have proper impulse response emulations. They don't have a way of making it sound like a speaker was there. That technology wasn't really available and being used on those early amp emulations or amp simulations. So what do I end up doing? I end up sticking a de-esser across those guitars, and it does wonderful things because the high end can just be like, sometimes it's offensive, sometimes it's okay. Well, a de-esser, as you know, is just a single band multiband compressor. It's just getting in there. And where it defaults, usually at about 5.5K, which really hurts your ears because that's where the S's are and the T's are that hurt your ears on a vocal, is a perfect place to get rid of that high end or reduce and control the high end electric guitars. Those are the 2 things that I find on master buses, mix buses if you like, your main stereo fader where your mix is going through. Those are the 2 main areas I find. The 3 to 5K gets super aggressive and there's a massive buildup of low mids, anywhere from about 250 to about 450. But usually, typically, I find 350 is a massive build-up area, particularly amongst drums and other instruments. The point is, get stuck in. Get stuck in on the individual elements and solve it there. Not only does it sound better, is more consistent across the whole mix, but you're going to learn more. You're going to get better results, and you're also going to learn more. You're going to understand where the issues are in the mix, as opposed to just trying to do a quick fix on the master bus. And I know I've said this 100 times before, but that's what mastering engineers do. And they try not to do too much. They're trying to do the minimal amount to make your music sound the best it possibly can be. Mix the music, don't master it. Mix it. Master it. If you're going to do it on your own, master it as a different stage or give it to a mastering engineer. Whichever one you choose to do or you have to do given financial constraints, make sure you solve the problems leading up to the master bus, the mix bus, the two bus, whatever you want to call it. I hope you're enjoying these tips. Of course, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. And of course, leave a bunch of comments and questions below. And if you have any tips or tricks that you think are, reflected in these 5 questions, please suggest them down below. I love getting involved and answering questions and getting into wonderful discussions. Number 3, avoid multiband compression on your mix bus. Please, please, please. It's exactly the same issue. Now, there is a temptation to use fancy multiband compressors. There are so many of them. The problem is that if you use it on your mix bus and you mix into it, all that's going to happen is every time you boost something, it's going to turn it down. If you've got too much 400, 500, 700, 1K on an instrument and it pokes its head out, the multiband will go beep and turn it down. Okay, you might say, well, okay, what's wrong with that, Warren? Well, you know what? Across your 40 tracks or however many you've got different things that are going to come up and down all the time. So the multiband compressor is going to control them. All sounds good, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. First of all, going back to my previous point, you won't learn anything because you won't understand that, instruments, the proper frequency response and what to enhance an instrument. You won't learn any of that. And secondly, I think most importantly, you will get the most boring, softest, horrible sounding mix ever. Because all it's doing is just deciding that everything has to be flat. And you're almost like printing white noise or pink noise. I know you're not. That's a silly thing to say. But the reality is everything becomes just a big wall of perfect 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz of just flatness. And trust me, it does not sound good. Unless you really, really have to fix an issue, like one problem you've got to find, something that's bothering you, do not reach for a multiband compressor. Do not put it on too early. Frankly, don't ever put one on. But if you have to put one on, there's got to be a reason for it. It's not something you should mix through. No mixers that at least I grew up listening to and we love and that we've even interviewed on this channel, none of them mix through multiband compression. And the reason is exactly what we're talking about. They're not trying to soften their mixes. They're trying to pick up instruments and feature them in exciting ways and then blend things, automate stuff so it comes up and fits around stuff and create that excitement. Avoid multiband compression unless it's corrective and there's a problem. There's no other way you can think you can solve it. Don't mix through it. Number 4, the reason why I bring this one up is because I've been getting a lot of mixes recently that have sounded super aggressive in the high mids. Don't mix too loud. I know this sounds really obvious because there's 2 things that spring to mind when you talk about mixing loud. Hearing damage. You don't want to blow your ears out by mixing too loud all the time. Obviously, that is a really important thing. But your ears naturally turn themselves down. So you mix loud, your ears turn it down. What do? You put another click on the volume, your ears turn themselves down. And what goes first? Where your ears are most sensitive. And as we all know, it's around about 2.25 to about 5K. We always used to say, years ago, 3, 4, 5. Those are the areas where your ears are most sensitive. When a baby is crying, it's right slap bang in those high mids. And you can hear it. And that's why it annoys you probably, is because that's where your ears are most sensitive. If we're mixing too loud, those things get turned down. And you will just not hear how massively aggressive and blatantly painful you're making that 3 to 5K area. So I've done it 1,000 times. I've mixed with the band are making me turn it up louder. They're like, yeah, it sounds amazing. They're cranking it. Next day I come in, I have to turn it down because the console's set woo, up here somewhere. So I turn it down, I play it back, and it is the loudest, most offensive thing in the mid-range, and not in a good way. Because my ears had turned themselves down from the night before, and now they've recovered, and you can hear what it's really like. So don't mix too loud. Number 1, you want to protect your ears. But number 2, your mixers will suck. They will suffer. They will suffer from being far too aggressive in the high mids. Number 5 is a big one, and it's something that keeps coming up, and that is listen to the whole song. You have to listen to the whole mix. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me started. I don't mind soloing. Of course I want to solo. But how do I make a decision what to solo? I listen to the whole song. So what I've been doing, and what I've been doing for years and years now, is hopefully when you get a song to mix, there's a rough mix. If you've got a rough mix, that makes your life so much easier because you have an idea of the producer or the artist's vision of the song. You play it down, and usually you identify things that you immediately want to improve. So that's fantastic. You open up the session, you listen to the song, you know what their vision is. Now, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they're looking for you to mix it because they don't have an idea of how to take it past the post. So what do? I press play in that instance, and I just start volume balancing. You'll see me do it on all of my live streams. I just start volume balancing and creating a little bit of a mix. And I'll start panning a few things around while it's playing in real time. And frankly, if it's a 4-minute song, usually by the end of it, I've got, yes, you've guessed it, a rough mix. And it allows me to make decisions. Now with that quick, rough, panned around, volume done in real time mix, I might then press play again, and you know what? I'll hit the solo button because something is bothering me and I can't figure out what is wrong with that guitar part. So I'll solo it and go, there's something horrible and nasal. And I'm like, oh, it's this guitar part that's poking its head out. So maybe I'll apply a little bit of EQ to that guitar part. Problem solved. And then I unsolo and listen to it in context. Again, I hear something else I want to improve. So maybe I go to it and I'll solo it and apply some EQ and some compression or whatever it is. The point is, like, it's the process of soloing, unsoloing, listening as a whole. This is the most important thing. And this might sound really, really obvious. However, not many people do it. And this is probably a big fault of the professional YouTube community, is that they're sitting there and they're going, this is how you mix a kick drum. This is how you mix a bass guitar. People focus in on one instrument and mix it. That's not how you mix. You mix by mixing instruments to fit with each other, not just applying some set of, EQ, compression, and ideas. Of course you want to learn the tips. I love the tips. I love the effects. I love the panning of this and the that. But this is the stuff you apply with the thought process of like, oh, I need to improve this, as opposed to I have to do this. So once again, listen to the mix as a whole. Solo as much as you like, but make sure you come out of solo and listen to what you've done in the track. The biggest mistakes I've made over the years, and I will continually make, I'm sure, is to listen to something in solo and work on it for half an hour. It doesn't happen very often anymore that I spend half an hour on an instrument, but I've done it, and then I put it back in the mix, and it's the worst, stupidest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Listen to it as a whole. Get a feeling. And sometimes Eric will tell you, who's sitting over there, how many times have I made you play a rough mix to me before I've done it? Sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Yeah. I will sit on the couch back there. He's loaded up the tracks and I'll play the song. He presses play on it and I sit back and I listen to it. And I'm like, can you play it again? And he'll play it again. And I'll be like, once more. And he'll play it again. And it might go on like 4 or 5 times. I'm just listening to it, sitting on the couch. Then I'll go up and start working out. I need to hear the song. I need to understand what the heck I'm going to do to it. I'm not just going to like open it up without listening to it, without absorbing it, without getting an idea of it and start like EQing and compressing something. What I would suggest, if you're new to mixing, open up a song, start working on it, find a problem, and then maybe find the video that solves the problem if you're not sure how to do it. But don't apply a tip to something if it's not necessarily what you need to do. We're all here to learn and we're all here to impart information. It's really important that we share stuff. Thank you ever so much for watching. Please leave as many comments and questions as you can below. I love this community. I love how supportive it is. And of course, go to producelikeapro.com. You can sign up for the email list. There's also a free 14-day trial membership to the Academy. It's super fast growing. You'll see the same kind of names and people coming to the videos continuously. These are all people that help each other and really believe in helping each other. So thank you to everybody that is a part of the Academy. Thank you to everybody that just watches these videos and supports them. It's really, really important to us. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. And don't forget, of course, to hit the like button and subscribe and all that good stuff.